All right, welcome back to the Elias Makos Show. It is the second hour of the program. We are keeping track to the developing story in the breaking news. We are expecting 13 Israeli hostages and 12 Thai nationals to be released by Hamas this morning, our time. We are keeping track of that. Now, ever since the deadly attack carried out by Hamas on October 7th, the world has seen division, hatred, and unrest in the streets of Canada's biggest cities. Some people, like our next guest, say this is due to a collective failure by Muslim leaders to condemn the October 7th attack. My pleasure to welcome Raheel Raza onto the program from the Council of Muslims Against Antisemitism. Raheel, welcome to the program. It's a great pleasure to talk to you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
I would love, since this is your first time on this program, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. A Pakistani-Canadian author. Tell our listeners about yourself. How do you end up being part of the Council of Muslims Against Antisemitism?
Well, as you said, I'm a Pakistani-born Canadian citizen. I have been an activist, my entire grown-up life, and very involved with human rights issues. I was accredited with the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, and I went there regularly for many years. And one of the things that I noticed there was the angst against Israel constantly. All the countries with absolutely terrible human rights records would come up and accuse Israel of human rights atrocities. And this kept growing. So we have been speaking out against anti-Semitism and Jew hatred, which is actually a more appropriate word because it is Jew hatred, for a very long time. And then about 3 years ago, we decided to formalize this. And we also agreed that there need to be non-Jewish voices speaking out against Jew hatred. It has a much more of an impact. So we put together the Council of Muslims Against Antisemitism. We have a board and a global advisory committee. They're across the globe. And they're all Muslims. And that is the important aspect of this, that we are Muslims speaking out in support and solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters. And I think that that's an important voice.
Your recent piece, you just co-authored a piece in the National Post, and it's titled, Muslim Leaders Should Have Condemned Hamas Instead of Fomenting Hate. So let's get to that. What has been lacking from Muslim leaders, in your opinion, since October 7th?
Well, the first thing is that they have gone in for the changed narrative. So Hamas, Islamic Jihad, all these terrorist organizations headed by the IRGC of Iran and its proxy Hezbollah, they very quickly changed the narrative after October 7th. So while we know, and the world knows, and it's a fact that Hamas launched this unprovoked terrible attack on Israeli civilians and took hostages, very quickly they changed it first from a war of Hamas and Israel, and then it became Palestine and Israel. And then very soon they were talking about this as being a religious war, Muslims against Jews. And that is definitely not acceptable. But their PR machine, initiated by Iran, the propaganda that they produce has affected people. Especially the Muslim communities who maybe are not that well aware of the politics of the Middle East. They don't read that much. They don't go into the history and the background. They are just taken in by the propaganda, the social media, public relationing that's going on. And they gave in to the narrative. So what has happened is, while we know very clearly who the heroes and villains in this issue are, the heroes, of course, are the 240 innocent hostages. But, and of course, we know that they must be returned very soon, all of them, not just in groups. And the villains are Hamas. They are a recognized terrorist organization like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, just like the IRGC of Iran and its proxy Hezbollah. So how difficult is it for the Muslim leadership to actually first condemn Hamas? Well, this is what we would have liked to see, that they would have condemned Hamas, shown empathy for the October 7th attack victims, and, called for a release of the hostages. And then, of course, we talk about the Palestinian issue, which is also important.
So, it seems easy to me. It certainly seems easy to you, yet it doesn't seem easy to a lot of Muslim leaders. Why is that? Why is this not an easy discussion to be had?
Because they have been gullible and they've succumbed to the outright propaganda initiated by Hamas calling for death of all Jews. They, in countries that are, predominantly Muslim countries, there's a whole thing about the leadership, the votes, the popularity, the masses. So they rile up the emotions of the masses, and in a very wrong way. And so they do not look at the issue from the perspective of peace, because we know that Hamas doesn't want peace. And unfortunately, the masses are falling into this propaganda. What they also want to do, and this is a very strong feeling we have in our organization, they want to cleverly mainstream anti-Semitism and normalize it. If you see all the violence that's taking place on the streets of Canada, where it should never be happening, they want to normalize this anti-Semitism so that, it just becomes a part of everyday racism and bigotry, which it is not. The other thing that is problematic is that they keep connecting it to Islamophobia, which is an entirely different thing. When we speak about Jew hatred, we have to very specifically address, if you look at the statistics that have been put forth by the police department, the statistics of anti-Jew violence and hatred and harassment are much higher than anything that is happening in any other community. And of course, I absolutely recognize that we have to condemn bigotry, racism, discrimination, wherever it happens. But let's not collate the two. Right now, we're in a situation where after October 7th, the Jewish community is afraid. The children are being harassed in universities and educational institutions. Their homes are being targeted. Their businesses are being targeted. Is this the Canada that I came to 30 years ago? No. We have to stop it.
And on that end, on the Canada issue, let's talk about people that are representing the government. Amira El-Gawabi, the special representative on Islamophobia. I know in your piece in the National Post, you pay particular attention to her. On this program, by the way, I don't know if you remember in January of this year when she was named, what happened here in Quebec. Her comments about Francophones were making waves. Her comments about Quebecers being racist. Her comments about Canada Day and the monarchy. Those made a lot of headlines here. What are your thoughts on the role of people who are attached and affiliated with the Canadian government in this?
Well, our leadership is definitely not setting a shining example. And I think that is one of the problems we have in Canada. The leadership has to take a very, very strong stand on what is right and what is wrong. And as you just said, it's not that difficult, but how difficult it is for political leaders to take a strong stand on these issues. But is it about votes? Is it about popularity? I'm in a position right now where I get hate mail, death threats. I've been, hit with a lawsuit, fatwa. It's not about popularity. It's about the ethical and moral conviction of being able to sleep at night knowing you have said the right thing and done the right thing. And I think we must all stand up. This is not the Canada we want to see. Hate in the streets of Canada is not acceptable, but the leadership is weak. And, we're not getting the kind of guidance that we need to see. So people in positions of power are making statements that add fuel to the fire. This is not a time when our leadership should be adding fuel to the fire. We should be looking to calm down the situation and make a very clear example that those who will perpetuate violence on our streets will be punished. Very clear. No hate, no violence, no harassment in Canada.
We're continuing our conversation with Raheel Raza from the Council of Muslims Against Anti-Semitism. Raheel, just before the break, we were talking about what leaders should be doing, and I want to ask you your thoughts on, and we were talking about what we've seen on Canadian streets. tomorrow in this city, tomorrow in Montreal, there will be another, I don't know how you call it. Do you call it a rally or a protest? I sort of don't know what to call these gatherings. There will be another rally in downtown Montreal in front of Place des Arts. And I'm looking at the posting on Instagram and they're saying, they want the total, they want Palestine to be totally liberated. They won't say from what. It was a few weeks ago. We had Adil Sharkawi, the very, very controversial imam, at a similar rally like this, call for the extermination of Zionists. What do you think should be done with these? These are events that have been happening in Canada. We have, freedom of speech, and there's that. What do you think should happen in this country when there are gatherings like this?
Well, let me tell you that we have allowed this to happen since a long time. When the BDS movement started, when Israel Apartheid Week was being celebrated in university campuses, when the hateful Al-Quds Day parade initiated by Iran, implemented by Ayatollah Khomeini, takes place on the streets of Toronto. And I actually went to one and saw the hate there. So from my perspective, I'm a great supporter of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. I think everyone has a right to rally and protest. And yes, of course, they can come onto the streets and say that they want, freedom for Palestinians. They want rights for Palestinians. But when this morphs into hatred against Jews and annihilation of Jews and annihilation of Israel, it has to be stopped right there and then. We are getting into hate speech in a big way. But look at our leadership. They have allowed this to go on for so long that now it's become the norm. And this is what I was talking about, the concern that hatred is being normalized on our streets under the banner of free speech. Free speech should never accept hatred against another community. And this is pure hate. It's Jew hatred. They're not talking about peace or sitting around a table and having a conversation. They don't want peace the way you and I do. I'm talking about Hamas and the pro-Hamas supporters. They want Jews and Israel to disappear off the face of this earth. And how is it that in Canada we are allowing this to happen? The words of the Imam were the most hateful, and this, unfortunately, is where in some religious institutions, the hate is being perpetuated. And if the people who come there hear the same words over and over and over again, they succumb to it.
You are clearly not the most popular person in some Muslim circles. And I want to know how you deal with that, because I would imagine, by the way, for me, if in 5 years here at CJAD, I've been a very vocal proponent of Quebec's Bill 21. And I have, great Muslim women that come on this show and advocate and do this, I say fight the good fight. And I'll say sometimes I'll be the recipient of some hate. But what keeps me going is the messages in the DMs in the background from Algerians, Tunisians, Iranians that send me messages, say, Elias, thank you. I want to know what's happening to you. I know there's the public hate, but what really is the reaction from the community?
Well, surprisingly, a lot of the people that we meet, Muslims, who we sit around with in our living room, understand the situation once we explain it to them. The only problem is that they're not willing to speak up. Now, the term popular doesn't apply in my life. I gave up being popular a long time ago. It was a choice of being popular or speaking the truth and, my own conscience, which tells me that this is what I have to do. It's a very small drop in the ocean of the work that I have to do. Also, it makes me realize that it's impacting them because, when they respond with angst, it means that, what I'm saying, what I'm writing is affecting them. On the other hand, the positive response makes up for all of it. Our last article in the National Post about why Muslim leaders should have spoken out had over 800 comments.
Wow.
Which means that, the positive always outweighs the negative. I'm a very optimistic person. I always look at the glass full, and I believe that, we have to stand up and speak out no matter what.
Earlier this year, you wrote about your first trip to Israel. I want to read one line from it. Every moment of my first trip to the Jewish state was an awakening about the misinformation I had been fed. Tell us about that.
Well, of course, I grew up in Pakistan. I was, brainwashed with pretty much the same propaganda that everybody else was. However, I was an independent reader, and I was very interested and fascinated by this community that I had read about in the Diary of Anne Frank and Leon Uris's Exodus at a very, very young age. In fact, somebody asked me yesterday, so you could get these books in Pakistan? Yes. In the Pakistan that I grew up, my childhood, these books were easily available through the USIS and the British Council libraries. And I was fascinated. So when we came to Canada, Israel was not really on the radar, but my husband was working for an airline and they started flights to Israel. And we looked at each other and said, let's go and really find out by being in the country what this is all about. And people scared us. They said, look at you, you're Pakistani-born Muslims, you're going to be stopped at every place. We were never stopped anywhere. It was such a great experience. And I still remember we, of course, did the whole tourism thing, went all the way from, Haifa to Jerusalem. And then we went, being Muslims, we went to the Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray. And I prayed there that I would like to come back with a little more time. And they say you should be careful what you pray for in a holy place. We had not even been back 6 months when I was invited to a conference that was hosted by the late Shimon Peres called Facing Tomorrow. And subsequently, till the end of the time that till he turned 90, I went for 6 years to that conference. So in total, I've been to Israel 14 times. The last time I was there, the immigration officer asked me, and where is your Israeli passport? And we had a good laugh together. But, one thing that stands out for me, and I think that this is really important, the entire time I've been there, I kept waiting for somebody, Israeli, Jewish, to ask me who I am, where I've come from, express their hate, so to speak, against, what is happening. It never happened. It never happened. There was never any hate professed from the Israelis, from the Jews. And I think that speaks for a lot. The other thing that impacted me was I found out very soon that we are in the same fight, a fight against a radical ideology. And they get it when and then, of course, I went and spoke at conferences and I spoke about terrorism and I spoke about extremism and radicalization of our youth. They actually got it very quickly. And here I am in Canada for the last 30 years trying to put this across and say, please understand the jihadi mindset. It does not want peace. It does not want to talk. It only wants death.
Raheel, we have to leave it there. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite some time. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation. And I'll tell you this, you are very popular on the Elias Macko Show. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
That is Raheel Raza. Have a great weekend as well. Raheel Raza is with the Council of Muslims Against Antisemitism.